Hey, what's happening out there, everybody? I hope you're all feeling fantastic in your worlds. Today here, I have a fun video for you guys. We're going to look back at Arnold Schwarzenegger's initial run of leading roles post-politics to talk about what he delivered in each of these movies as a headliner and how each of these flicks also brought some of that 80s and 90s action movie flavor into the era to remind us why Arnold was and always will be just a superstar in this genre. Now, Arnold did pop up in smaller appearances in a few projects that he had already completed, but really, Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines was his final movie before switching to politics and becoming the governor of California in 2003, and once in office, he would serve as the governor all the way up until 2011.
Get the fuck out of here!
Just after his political run, he did make appearances in the first two Expendable movies, but in 2013, he would begin his return as a headliner, and in one case, a co-headliner, in a trio of surprisingly capable actioners, films that all brought something different to the table and showed that Arnold still had plenty of charisma and screen presence left in the tank. The first of those movies was The Last Stand. This was Arnold's first leading role since Terminator 3. It's a pure showdown-themed action romp that I think very much feels like the old actioners from the 80s. This one was directed by Kim Ji-woon, who also directed an elegantly gritty movie called I Saw the Devil that I highly recommend seeking out if you haven't seen it. As for this movie, now January is usually considered the dumping ground for films. This movie only made $48 million on a $45 million budget, but it is a fun actioner that really thrives on its simplicity. You have this escaped cartel leader racing through the desert in a sleek Corvette ZR1. He's on the run and heading for the border, and Arnold just so happens to be, of course, the sheriff of the last border town that he's going to need to cross to get into Mexico. So it really is a simple recipe for a classic showdown flick, and it provides just enough charm and violence to really give you a good time. If you like old movies like Raw Deal or Marked for Death, the plot is simple, the characters are all a bit recycled as well, but it's nothing that gets in the way of just, I think, being able to ride the tension that elevates as this suave cartel leader races towards Arnold's unsuspecting town. The pace of the story bounces between the cartel leader and Arnold and his small crew of deputies who are unaware of anything that's going on, as well as the FBI task force led by Forrest Whitaker, who are tracking down this crime lord as well. You know they're all going to come to a head, and the anticipation for that, I think, is admittedly enjoyable. And I think all the pieces of this one really come together nicely into a fast-paced movie that can lure you in with a collection of performances from the likes of Jamie Alexander, Luis Guzman, Johnny Knoxville, and Peter Stormare that I think all make the most out of recycled character types. Everything in this movie sort of happens in real time, which does keep the tension elevated, and Arnold is as commanding as ever as this sheriff manning a small border town. He doesn't try to do too much action-wise. He keeps it simple with gun work and grounded killing. He, in fact, actually embraces his age, which I think does make the character really pop with some appeal, and it adds some charming just grandpa vibes to this old dog having to stop a crime lord, which I really enjoyed, and I think this all helps the action land with impact as well because it's not so over the top. It's really just a constant chase sequence from the timeline of the cartel leader. I think this really paves the way for some bursts of violence as his cronies kind of clear the path ahead of him, and once everything comes to a head in Arnold's town, the action really does explode with a lot of fun. With this movie, I think Arnold definitely carries the action well. He showed audiences that he hadn't skipped a beat. He gets his killing in for sure, but he does so while also taking a beating. And to me, with The Last Stand, I think Arnold showed he could take an 80s plotline and use it to show audiences that he could still be a lead after taking a long break from this genre. Then just 9 months later came the event movie that I would say I've pretty much waited my entire life for, a collaboration that I could have only dreamed of as an 80s and 90s kid. Yes, the Expendables gave us these men on screen together, but Escape Plan was the actioner that brought us Arnold and Stallone shoulder to shoulder sharing an action flick. And sure, both of these icons are both pretty much well past their prime, but it didn't really matter because this movie is damn awesome.
Great flick! Great friggin' flick!
Prison actioners were a staple in 80s and 90s cinema, and if you like movies like Lockup or Death Warrant, then this certainly is a movie to check out. This one also has kind of a Tango and Cash vibe to it, and I think the movie was successful in bringing the old recipe into the current era at the time. It just delivers tons of action, violence, bravado, with the bonus of Arnold and Stallone both going all in on this one. This one has a solid plot. Stallone's character designs prisons, and he also finds holes in security systems to make these facilities stronger. He takes on this job from a mysterious client to only find out that he's been set up and sent to another unknown facility to just be locked up and never released. And inside he meets Arnold, a fellow prisoner, and from there they plan for escape and the search for who set them up. I think these guys had a great chemistry together here, and it had a nicely layered plot line to sink your teeth into. The budget was an estimated $50 million, and it brought in around $137 million worldwide, so hey, I'd say that's not too shabby for a couple of veterans in the genre of action movies. I think in this one, both Arnold and Stallone show just a great rapport with each other, with layers of humor and just bickering and banter between each other. I think their timing was nicely crafted, and their relationship growth felt natural. You can just really feel that both of them are sharing this film together, with neither trying to outshine the other, and it's just a delight for action movie fans. I mean, seeing them banter and throw down with each other before forming an alliance is just awesome for a kid that grew up during my era. I mean, it does kind of follow the formula to a T, but it's still a movie that crafts an intricate escape plan, and watching Arnold and Stallone work together to escape this high-tech prison was just the perfect playground for tons of adrenaline-filled action. And again, it doesn't try to do too much. It doesn't try to make Arnold or Stallone larger than life. It keeps the tone grounded and gritty, and the approach does give it some appealing validity. And I think all the fight scenes and the spots of gunplay all land with much more of an impact, because it's not just a big dumb actioner. I think there's an intricacy to it. You're kind of sitting there wondering how the hell they're going to get out of this place. There's lots of twists and misdirections that I think are nicely timed, and you can easily just get your snacks and be pulled into this mysterious prison with these two legends. And something else I really liked about this movie was how it kept its focus on Stallone and Arnold. So you get plenty of time with these guys together, and I certainly will give credit to Jim Caviezel, because he admittedly does take a generic villain and make it his own. He was naturally sadistic, which is something you want in a villain, and I think what he lacked in physical prowess, he certainly made up for with cunning intellect. Plus, I mean, he has this sophisticated prison and an army of guards for Arnold and Stallone to work through, which they certainly do in just joyfully action-packed ways. It's filled with action, but it's also woven with a story that can capture your imagination as well. Which leads us into the final film we're going to be talking about in this video. Arnold took a darker turn in the crime thriller Sabotage from director David Ayer, who also penned the script in this one with Skip Woods. This movie didn't really do well at all, to be honest. Most critics didn't like it, and it brought in only around $22 million on an estimated $35 million budget. Now, this may be a flick where the whole doesn't equal the sum of its parts, but there still is enjoyment in seeing Arnold take on this dark and much seedier character. I think he plays the role well. It does feel natural for him, and he showcases a touch of his dramatic side with some emotional layering as well. Yet there is not a second that he does not command the screen as the alpha in this film, which I really did enjoy. I do think Arnold is capable in the lead, but for me, really the bright spot was Mariel Enos. I think she was just savage in this role. She really did feel at home with this brooding cast. And as for the cast, yeah, I think they were all a bit wasted. This movie doesn't really know what it wants to be. It kind of tiptoes around being a crime thriller, but it also focuses on the drama in long stretches, which all does come at the cost of what could have been some added action, something that does bring the film down a couple notches as a whole. But there's still a lot of movie to enjoy in this one. I enjoyed the dark, seedy atmosphere that it had. It's really a movie with no good guys. Arnold and his team have done some shady shit, so they start getting killed off one by one after stealing $10 million from the cartel, and you may not really care about them all individually, but it still manages to generate a modest amount of intrigue and wanting to see where things are going to go. The layering of the storyline doesn't fully come together either. There are some gaps in logic at the sake of convenience, yet but it's still entertaining to see Arnold take a darker turn here. And I also think the cast of familiar faces comes in here to make the most out of some plug-and-play characters. I think it makes this movie easily watchable, but had the story been more evenly developed and had a few more action sequences been sprinkled in, this could have been a much better flick. And that is the video for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this look at Arnold's return to the silver screen after his political career. I think this was a solid run to get his feet back into the pool. He certainly showed that he had some acting left in the tank as well. And sure, his return to Hollywood may not be filled with as much gusto as an 80s and 90s kid like myself would have hoped for. He's maybe relying on the Terminator franchise a bit too much for his relevance, but it's going to be fun to see what the future holds for Arnold and what he plans on doing next.